And lo, it shall pass that the reviewer can't get off level 1, and he shall not care for the game, or want to play it for more than 20 minutes. But lo, he shall be fearful of the software company dropping advertising and missing him off the free crate of beer list at Christmas, and he shall tremble and quake mightily, as all rival mags have given it a high score. So, he shall give it a score low enough to dissuade potential buyers, yet high enough to pacify the software people. And that score shall be the number of the beast, and it shall be 73%.
Today's defendant, Total, Issue 4, April 1992. The game, Days of Thunder. Court is in session. I'm not sure everyone even knows Days of Thunder now. I suddenly feel old. It was an early Tom Cruise generic action movie. Imagine Top Gun for racing, and you're absolutely there. It was made 4 years later by the same directors and producers. It didn't quite make lightning strike twice, but it was still a commercial success. Much like Top Gun, while a silly throwaway action movie, there was quite a lot for nerds in the subject matter. To get some of the racing footage, the producers entered cars in real NASCAR races, where they were run by one of the top teams, and at one point actually led a race. The first sponsor of Cruise's car in the movie is a real car dealer owned by the guy who owns that team. Random aside, Cruise's character name Cole Trickle is already amusing enough in itself, but the name is actually a tribute to a real NASCAR racer who, for purposes of avoiding giggling, I will identify using his collectible trading card. Inevitably, like every other movie between 1980 and 2000, there was a tie-in video game for every format in sight. Duties were split across many teams, with what can best be described as inevitably variable results. But we're interested in the Game Boy version, by Argonaut. Argonaut is a name that might ring some vague bells at the back of your head. Their most famous outputs are Star Fox and Stunt Race FX on the SNES, and more importantly, the Super FX add-on chip that actually made those possible in the first place. Those are a good indication of Argonaut's strongest point actually, creating functional 3D worlds on machines that, if we're honest, had no business hosting them. And that's where we start here. It would have been very easy to make Days of Thunder a top-down arcade racing game on the humble Game Boy, but that's not where this is going at all. In fact, this is a very different and surprising approach for a 1992 handheld game based on a popcorn bubblegum action movie from the people who would go on to bring us such highbrow entertainment as Gone in 60 Seconds, Bad Boys, and a little franchise called Pirates of the Caribbean. Let me explain. And like we said, creating 3D worlds on machines that had no business hosting them. This is a practice session at Daytona in Days of Thunder, and it's a 3D constructed world at least. You can't do anything so clever as turn around and go the other way or anything, but just look at that thing fly. I doubt there's any Game Boy game of the time pushing something around this quick. For instance, this is 1991's Bill Elliott's Fast Tracks, from the creators of both the Test Drive and Need for Speed series. Despite pushing a lot less detail in the world and still being pretty impressive, you can see the poor bastard refreshing the screen. If one of the world's most legendary driving game developers can't get close, you know Days of Thunder is doing a good job. The frame rate suffers in the surprisingly attractive traffic, of course, but at no point is this a slow game, and there's an incredibly convincing sense of being in a close race that few games before the 32-bit era at least ever managed. It's helped by the large fields. While sensibly, Argonaut haven't entertained simulating an entire 43-car NASCAR field. We were a few years off even PC games doing that. They have included 19 AI cars, and you're going to spend most of your time fighting at least some of them. Part of this is because the driving physics are what you'd call sim for a Game Boy. At the smaller ovals, you have to brake, for instance, and your driving line is as important as it is in real life, especially when you're trying to work out your route past several other cars in order to get to the front, as slipstreaming is absolutely the name of the game. Well, it's not, it's Days of Thunder, but you know what I mean. They can do the same to you though, and they're not shy about giving you a little nudge into the bargain. The depth is probably platform appropriate too. Days of Thunder has a compact but mostly sensibly chosen collection of NASCAR's most famous ovals. It'd be nice to see something from the sub-mile category like Bristol included, but there's everything else here between 3/4 and 2 miles long, including the weird 3-corner oval at Phoenix. You can do a single race of between 1 and 40 laps, and the same is true of Championship mode using NASCAR's real point system of the era, although the drivers are from the film rather than reality. It is, of course, not perfect. The mechanism for doing a pit stop is awkward at best, involving you pressing a complex series of directions to control each individual member of your 6-man pit crew. Getting into those pits can be awkward too, and it's probably also too easy to get caught up in the AI battles where they end up effectively blocking the track in front of you, making progress tricky. Certainly if you qualify down the field, you're going to need one of the longer races to make your way up. Which brings up another problem, and a crucial one for a handheld game. There is no mechanism of saving. No password, no battery backup, no nothing. Given this was a game designed for a machine normally ran on batteries which, at best, had to be recharged outside the machine, and offers a championship mode of 40-lap races, this is a weird omission. Completing a championship of 40-lap races would probably take longer than a set of batteries would last, even in the legendarily frugal machine. And that's assuming you don't have to take a break, which seems likely on a machine you'd be playing on the bus or in a waiting room. It'd also be nice to have any indication of how well you're doing in qualifying, given it offers you a multiple, if small, number of laps in order to set your best time. Instead, you're blind as to whether you just need a marginal improvement, or need to push the boat out and then set fire to it with your last chance. Ultimately though, I am impressed by this. Very few Game Boy driving games even attempt to be this kind of a simulation of actual driving and racing, and even fewer pull it off even a quarter as well. In fact, speaking in 2020, it really only has one enemy, and the call is coming from inside the house. This is Argonaut's own later Game Boy port of the arcade game Race Driving, the sequel to Hard Driving. There are no good home ports of either of these games. They were massively innovative, absolutely gorgeous, serious business sim racing driving games after all. Except, this port. It's absolutely brilliant. What I imagine is a development of the Days of Thunder engine powers a full 3D world which, while monochrome, has everything the arcade has, while unlike almost all the other home versions, also having controls suitable for digital-only machines. Total themselves would hand it 88% in issue 19. It's also the one you should have. You can buy Race Driving on cartridge now for £2.50 from CEX. You should do this. It's essential for all Game Boy owners. Days of Thunder, meanwhile, will run you £15 minimum when it's in stock. And while it's a worthy attempt and a massively brave thing to do with that particular license, it's just not as good as a pure handheld game. Especially with no method of saving. So what of Total to review? Well, it's a little bit content-free, to be honest, spending over half the word count on scene setting and inter-colleague banter. It does, though, come to a lot of the same conclusions I did. They point out the impressive graphics, albeit suggesting that they become too confusing and cluttered when it gets busy. And to be fair, I can see this on an original Game Boy screen compared to the modern Game Boy clone I played it on for this, or the large monitor and Raspberry Pi I did the capture on for this episode. They do praise the longevity, but like me bemoan the lack of any form of saving. The conclusion isn't top quality either. It's literally, this is one for racing addicts only. Or as Amiga Power would have put it, if you like that sort of thing, you'll like this. Or as Sega Power would have put it, if you have McDonald's Treasureland Adventure, you don't need this. Yes, I'm still bitter. I'm minded though to consider this at least partly a failing of space for the review, and biased by the screen of the original machine not really being up to it. Certainly I don't believe they've in any way given this a mark at the behest of the publisher. I can find 2 other peer-reviewed reviews of this game. CVG gave it 80% in a review that would have got them banged up if it was 7% less, their only criticism being that it's samey. The other review was an 8 out of 12 for some reason from the German magazine Actella Software Markt. For reasonable doubt though, Total would give low marks. Just a few pages on they hand 38% to another high-profile movie license in Home Alone, and 31% to a dodgy conversion of the otherwise excellent arcade game Marble Madness. And certainly it appears big publishers couldn't bully them. Super Mario Land 2 would be considered an all-time classic by many, but they had no trouble giving Nintendo's highest profile handheld title of the early 90s only 70%. I disagree strongly, but the point is they clearly said what they think. I'd say we need to find another game to put them on trial for, but from the first 21 issues of Total I flicked through, this is literally the only 73% they gave. I feel ultimately Total's been a bit lazy here, but this is a court of law as far as you know, and given there is reasonable doubt, Total, I find you not guilty. You're free to go, but I warn you, we're going to be watching you. Court dismissed.